You read the title, I wrote the title, we both know that was clickbait, right? Great. Listen, I'm sorry, but YouTube won't push my videos without a little bit of bait, and I'm sure I'm gonna piss some people off with this video anyway, so make sure to comment below how I've personally ruined your crops and incinerated your entire family. Hey there y'all, it's Nuoance, and as I continue to grow, I follow more VR creators. I start seeing less about VRChat based content and more VR based opinions. And one of the biggest complaints that I've been seeing is that while headsets continue to develop, get more immersive, more powerful, and being more portable, we don't have the entertainment to keep up with it. In short, it's like buying a $3,000 computer to play the original Bendy and the Ink Machine. But as someone who spends most of their VR time inside VRChat, I do rarely hear these complaints. Maybe this is a bit tone deaf, because maybe the VRChat community is satisfied with buying a $1,000 headset for mirror dwelling, drinking, and dancing. But one thing I've always found insanely interesting is the amount of money people will hard dive into their VR lives to play little more than VRChat. Before you start, of course this isn't everyone. There are many people who do play other VR games, but I do know quite a few people who are in VR for just VRChat. I know people who have some other staples like Beat Saber or Blades of Sorcery and also play VRChat. I know people who are full send VR and then joined VRChat as an afterthought. There are also quite a few VR creators who do love all things VR but hate all things VRChat. And finally, there are those who bought VR for VRChat, tried other games, and couldn't find anything of interest, so just stuck around. And I wonder why VRChat has always been seen kind of like a separate entity at times. For many, VRChat is what opens people up to the world of VR. I know that's what it did for me. Without it, I wouldn't have had any interest in the technology for at least another few years. And do you know the reason for this? Content. It is no secret that VR games are lacking. There are some good ones, some okay ones, and some cash-grabby ones. Because of my position at a VR company, I do have to be a bit careful with what I say and do, but I will also be honest in my opinions on what I think are crap games and what I think aren't crap games. And I know I should have said this earlier, but I couldn't find a place to throw it in. I am no expert on this. I'm just a girl saying my own opinions on something I've noticed or felt. There are plenty of popular VR games such as Pavlov, Gorilla Tag, Beat Saber that all just get just as much, if not more, attention than VRChat, but they all already have their own niche to themselves as well. I'm not talking about these kinds of games which are already pre-established with their own communities or have their own style of fun down pat. This video is focusing on the hundreds of half-baked VR games that keep getting pumped out aimlessly to try and revolutionize VR, while being nothing different at all, or overcharging for the content that they provide us. VRChat is different, not only because it's a social game, but because there's a variety of content for people to explore and enjoy. Without adding VRChat, there are at most a small handful of other VR games that actually interest me, and I've gotten to play over 50 titles by now, I'm sure. One consistency that I hate is that many VR-based games lack personality, interest, or drive that regular non-VR games have. In my opinion, if I could play it on PC or on a console, what drives a user to want to play it in VR? VR takes a bit more energy to set up and put on just versus grabbing your Nintendo or loading up your PC. If the game is just pretend your hand is a ninja running across the scenery while you're in your mom's car and has a cartoonish style with different costume options for just your fingers, the market's not going to be super interested, or, not the adult market, that is. So many VR-based games focus their VR-based gimmicks so much so that the point of the game itself is kind of lost. I've played games that was the focus of their immersion, but make the controls too complex, the items too hard to see, that you get more frustrated than scared. I've experienced games that are all about using the space you have, but don't take into account the stuff in your space, so you have to work twice as hard and use tools outside the original game to get through. I can't name how many times I've started up a new game for work and was overwhelmed by another UI menu that had to be different and make the buttons do different things and is overly complex just for the sake of feeling complex. And I wonder if somehow VRChat is responsible for spoiling my opinion on some VR games. Now keep with me for a minute. For those who do play VRChat, especially much more than any other VR title, we are used to being able to enjoy things with our friends for free. There was a map a few years ago, I believe in 2021, that was a horror map that was made for one player only. I remember hearing complaints from my friends all around me about why would someone make a horror map that was made for one person? Yeah, it was supposed to be an experience, and I respect their creative choice, but for me and quite a few other people, it turned them off from wanting to actually enjoy the map. Some people have been able to make a full living off of what they make inside VRChat alone. Especially now, there are VR companies dropping like flies, and yet a single soy boy can build a VRChat world, slap a Patreon in it, and have a semi-stable income if it gets popular enough. Not everyone can do it, but the fact that there are a handful of creators and communities that can self-sustain within a free game still blows my mind today. And it makes me really wonder why that is. Why are so few good VR games out there when there's obviously a market for it? People are able to support small devs on VRChat but don't have the interest in buying a $10 or $15 game that was theoretically done by a small team of professionals versus just one person? Going back to what I said earlier, I've played around 50 or so titles by now. Not a lot in normal game terms, but in VR I think that's pretty good. Do you know how many worlds in VRChat I've played? Hundreds. Not thousands yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. One thing I'd like to mention is that with all the VRChat made worlds I've played, I've recently been starting to think more in depth if I would play them if they weren't on VRChat. Not even if they were a purchasable item, just if I'd play it for free on its own separate title, and well, quite a few of them got the no. Even some ones that I really enjoy. In reality, there is a lot to factor when looking at reasons why VR games don't do well, from their price points, their compatibility, multi versus single player, avatars, gameplay, accessibility, the list goes on. But to me personally, I've narrowed it down to 3 big reasons why I think I much rather prefer VRChat made games versus VR made ones. First up is probably the easiest answer: comfort. VRChat is a free game, and the controls will stay consistent no matter what world you enter. Every game world will have the same jump button, the same grab button, the same interaction buttons. There will never be changes made for the sake of standing out or being different. This is a universal complaint when games have standard buttons that do standard things, like changing WASD for movement to IJKL, or the jump button from X to triangle. Sure, as a dev you think you could do it, but are people going to be turned off from your game because of that? I've played plenty of games where I've had to relearn what buttons do what, and when it's a game that has a million different abilities, mechanics, items, what have you, the last thing I want to relearn is basic movement. And let's consider that some VR games force movement mechanics, like not being able to turn around with your joystick and having to turn physically around. It's not natural at first to some people, so it's just another thing to try and learn. Like climbing, for example, it should be as simple as grabbing the wall and going up. Some games don't do that and instead have their own method to climb. It's overwhelming when you consider new players or players who play mostly one style VR games having to learn all of these new things at once. Another small piece of comfort I'm gonna just add on at the end here is avatar look. Oculus is getting better with implementing their own version of Mii's, I don't know what they're called, that you can customize, but most of the time you have to choose between pre-made looks that never actually look anything like you or just the one look that you get. And as someone who plays 90% VRChat, that is a huge turnoff because it breaks my immersion when I look down and I see chunk of man hands. When you're a regular gaming on PC or console, this isn't as important because, well, it's PC or console, but it's loads different when you look down with a VR headset and see a body you don't recognize in VR. And at least for me, it makes it easier to recognize other players when you're playing with friends. Which leads us to the second issue, social. VRChat is a free game made mostly by the players who play it, and we'll go more into that aspect later, but the important thing I want to bring up now is that as a free game, anyone can enjoy it at any time. You don't have to convince your friends to buy something or buy it for them. You don't even have to worry about download size for limited spaces like on the Quest. I know I've gotten spoiled by the content that I can do within VRChat with my friends that playing something else seems kind of more like a chore. This is by far the least important section because not every game has to be a multiplayer, but I do know personally if it doesn't have a story, I'd rather play with friends versus strangers. As a girl on the internet, well, you can guess my hesitation to talk to strangers in a game like Contractors. And out of the 3 reasons social is being the least important in terms of mechanic, it is also one of the most important in terms of just getting your game out there. My community, Converse, hosts a monthly world hop that allows people to check out worlds that they may have never gone to alone. Meanwhile, if I try to play Among Us VR with my community and the people who've actually bought the game, I could not get a single person to join. No one. Yet they'll join a game of Among Us in VRChat. I'm not fully sure why this happens, but my guess is that like maybe because there are more people they know that they can play with who don't have the game on VR, or maybe it's just the ease of being able to switch games out when you're done. I mean, when you're done with Among Us, you could move to Mortar 4, or you can move to Prison Escape, or you can move to the new game Blackout. Whatever has you. Though I will bring a very common downside to this. Regular people building worlds and avatars mean that these worlds and avatars are not built by professionals and are super unoptimized, especially the cross-compatible worlds. This means that sometimes somewhere cool may not actually be a place that you can enjoy with friends, and most of the time you'll have to hide everyone's avatar to enjoy a large group of people. This is something that can get very frustrating, especially in spaces that were meant for large groups, or worlds that have long-form entertainment. But at least I have the opportunity to meet a large group of people in a multiplayer game, and I have the freedom and know-how to block them if they're aggressive. I've bought games that had zero online presence, and I've witnessed games have a huge multiplayer release only to crash a year later because no one kept up with it. It's a hard competition to break through, but it's so weird to me that I could drop $30 on a subpar VR game and not even get enough time to purposely enjoy it because they have a community of 30 or so players total, so there is never anyone online doing random matches. And this is a complex topic, one that I don't really have the answer to, since I think the devs should be paid for the hard work they give. I want to mention something important here. I'm not saying that all VR games should be free. Just the opposite, actually. I think devs should charge what the games are worth. And I think right now, the VR pricing is way off. There are games that I've bought that were super overpriced for what they had. And in reverse, games that were undercharging for their content. Sure, there are going to be people who think I'm over-exaggerating my opinions on the VR community, but I seriously think that minus for select games, there is an issue with the quality of some VR titles. VRChat isn't obviously killing off the VR industry, but I think the VR industry needs to take a good look at where a large chunk of the market is and understand why people love it. Which brings me to what I think is the most important issue: variety. As mentioned many times now, VRChat is free, and by being free, you're most likely to try new things out. You've got nothing to lose. There are communities dedicated to creating new and interesting things for our virtual world, and many of them are free to enjoy. I know games that are seen as an afterthought in a VR world be sold as its own separate game on the Quest for $10. It takes much less time and energy trying to find new things in VRChat because it's recommended either by the game itself or by the community that comes from it. You find the world, open it up, wait on the loading screen, and then play. With other games, you have to buy it or just look it up to download it. And with the amount of free things to do on the App Lab, there are a lot of misses compared to hit interesting games that people, well, they're gonna get bored of looking. I got bored of looking. I'm tired of games related to first-person shooters, for example. I've made a TikTok making fun of all the companies that swear up and down that they're the newest innovation for shooters in VR, for it only to be a basic shooter with a complex setup. And the funniest part about it is people actually got upset at that video and started naming more than one game that my video could have been about. That's self-explanatory, right? Let's use an example. Let's say that there's a company that is selling, I don't know, beer pong minigame for $10. You could only play that game with other people who bought that game for $10. And what if it's not actually a good game of beer pong? What if it's just basic and has no or minimal extra flair, and maybe even the ball physics are terrible? Meanwhile, I could load into VRChat and find a multitude of places to play beer pong for free with whoever I want to play with. And I could look however I want while doing it. And I could be talking to people while the game plays or watching other people play it while I play pool nearby, which maybe could also be a separate $10 game by the same company. Yes, VRChat is very buggy, and there are things that are broken. No, VRChat has no half-life level of detail, and the mechanics within the game are limited to what VRChat gives you. Go play some of those really broken Beat Saber worlds. Compared to the real thing, it is nothing alike. But VRChat has small-time creators making content that would be fit as its very own game. So why don't we actually take some time to look at some of the long-form content within VRChat? There are tons of VRChat made maps that are game-worthy. Maps that I would 100% pay money for as its own experience. Not only because of the enjoyment I got from the map alone, but because I could bring the people special to me to the worlds as well and watch them experience just as I did. Treasure Heist, Noir, Summer Flare, Pop Escape, Devouring, Great Adventures Escape, The Smile Room, just to name a few. All super unique in their own ways and worth a million compliments because of the hard work, dedication, and soul that was put into them. One game I can bring up is The Exorcist, which was a popular horror game with tons of VR creators playing in the past. A quick Google search shows me that an average gameplay time is around 2.5 to 3 hours long, and that is from their very own Steam page. Time to check off your bingo cards, because out of all the worlds I mentioned above, at least 3 of them take just as long, with a Devouring averaging over 3 hours for new players, upwards to 6 hours of gameplay if you're really stuck. A $25 game that has roughly the same or less gameplay time than a free game within VRChat that had zero, to my knowledge, monetary support, which was made by 4 freaking people! I actually got the opportunity to meet Fiona recently, and she recognized my videos that I've made on the Devouring before. She mentioned that she, as well as the other creators, love it when people take the time to make videos and look at the little things in their work. But in reality, my videos would have nothing to look at if it wasn't for the creativity and ambition behind each and every project. There are maps that I will carry with me for a long time because of the influence they had on me and the opportunities they gave me to finally do something fun with the people I love. Meanwhile, I've had a small selection of non-VRChat maps that I enjoy, and for the VR games that are good, they are good. I'll recommend them to the rooftops because I enjoy them so much. And there are games I don't particularly enjoy because of my playstyle that are objectively good, but they're just not my taste. But I do think that the overproduction of crap turns VR users off and trusting the VR dev community into making something good unless backed up by creators who have already made something of interest. It's not easy coming up with something mind-shatteringly cool, but at the very least, I'd wish for less asset-fipped VR titles that do less than the bare minimum and charge you $15 for it. I want to wrap this up by looking at a great example right now, Bullet Time Agent, a map that's been in development for literal years by a talented creator known as Lakuza. The detail, the intricacy, the different bits and baubles that all come together to make a single experience is something to look forward to, even if it's something I'm not super interested in because I don't really like shooters. The concept itself isn't even that revolutionary, but the trust between what Lakuza can make and what he has made before is enough of a reason for me to want to try it and to look forward to it. I hate horror, because it often carries jump scares that trigger my PTSD. And no matter how often I talk about these fears, how I try to explain that this kind of horror, the loud sounds that jump in your face, messes with me in a way that outside the game is not fun, people just tell me to grow up, deal with it. It's horror. I had faith because of the maps I played before by all the 4 ponies that their horror map, the Devouring, wouldn't be as horrifying. And I was delightfully right. It was the first time I ever got to actually enjoy something somewhat scary with my friends. And that is why I sing praises about the map, even if it wasn't the scariest thing to mankind. It was just scary enough for me to finally be able to experience fear for fun. This was the first map that I didn't look up spoilers for and actually get to play blind because I trusted that they would let me know if something was scary. And I don't even know any of them personally. That kind of trust is not easily built. I also want to bring up another weird point of view. Since anyone can build in VRChat, many people start to act like they're higher power in game dev progress. I've seen it, I've experienced it firsthand. VRChat has some of the most self-entitled, high on their horse kinds of creators who took a Unity class and know how to code a light on and off. And that itself is showcased in all VR games, not just VRChat. Trust me, there is more crap on VRChat than the App Lab alone. It's another topic that I've ranted and raved about, how toxic the creator community can be with their unneeded help and opinions. I don't think that gives much in terms of why some VR games aren't getting the love they expected, but I do know that with that understanding of the VR realm, there are some VR games out there that are charging $20 for the same quality level that I could have made. Seriously, I'm not kidding when I say that there's a VR game that I was introduced to that is one of the worst games I've ever played, and I don't think I'm gonna ever get over it. VRChat is not fully without its own faults. It is covered in faults. We all know what kind of tasteful people lurk in public worlds, the dangers that hide in private worlds, but strictly in terms of entertainment, I'm much more open to explore and find new things. And because of the community it's built and the community that I've built and the people I've met, there are others that suggest maps that I've never heard of, and I can follow creators who may recommend other creators for entertainment. I'm not going to pretend to know how to fix whatever problem this is. I know that VR companies are trying to build that trust, but it feels so far and few in between that a new VR title comes out that actually sparks mass interest in people. And I don't know if that's from marketing gone wrong or what. I mean, to be fair, it's been a hot minute since I've had any sort of VRChat map to look forward to, either in terms of long form, but I've always been really bad at finding cool spots for fun anyways. Literally the only 3 that are on my radar right now are Bullet Time Agent, Gumball 3.0, and the Smile Room 2. And only one of those is out right now. And one of those I won't even be playing. Sorry, Crispy. I can't wait to see what kind of game really pushes the boundaries of VR, something that VRChat won't be able to replicate easily. And you know what, this went on way longer than I expected it to, but thank you for sticking with me on it. Let me know what your favorite VR content is in the comments below, both in VRChat and outside of it. For me, my favorite VR game currently is Dyschronia, which I've yet to finish, but I am waiting for the final chapter. And my favorite VRChat map? Well, that's hard to say. There are plenty to choose from. Make sure to drink your water, eat your broccoli, and have a fantastic day. See y'all in the next video. Also, like, it's totally my birthday on the 16th, which was like yesterday when this video was posted. So, like, if you want to give me a present, just go ahead and click that subscribe button. Yeah, subscribe my hip!